You kind of lost me at data transfer. I don't know what's going on.
FTP, file transfer protocol.
Now, what we have to remember is that not every position can be changed to every other position.
And making sure that the users we have now stay happy and stay on while trying to attract some other people to play it.
They make
Hustle home, but yeah. No, that's over in a heartbeat. Ain't got any problem with that.
I can't hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
There we go.
Was none of that. Oh man, I was just saying, welcome to season 4. We've had 4 seasons, but not necessarily 4 years. They go about 20 episodes, and we'll run a new season. So wanted to welcome everybody to the show. Sorry for that glitch. Apparently my mic was cut off, but talked about the fact that we are having some guests on that have been on the show before, even back in the podcast days, and mentioned you were on about 15 months or so ago. Really happy to have you back on, zlionsfan. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here. And thanks for having me back.
Good deal. Now, those that don't remember, you're based in the Indianapolis area and do a little bit of web management or IT type of stuff, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm the kind of guy that does things that do not involve sports gaming or Sims or sports Sims. So it's not me. I didn't do it.
Okay, so we can't blame you for anything that is snafu with the website from time to time. You're not working for What If Sports. But
That's
if
right.
I recall, you did apply for a job there not long. Well, actually, it's been many years ago now.
Yeah, a few years ago. So there was, in fact, a point where basically it's where my because you know your Hoops Dynasty record has to be like below 400. You can apply for a job, and so now I've had a run of success, and I can't do that. But you know, if you notice, there's a couple of longtime devs who are still out there who, you know, they'll say it's because they want to keep an eye on things, but I think we all know. But yeah, it's just, you know, if things had gone a little differently, I'd be one of those incredibly dumb people who messes things up all the time. And, you know, I'd never be on the show, or I'd be the guy on the show who's like, oh, yeah, we can fix recruiting. I'll have that done tomorrow. Sure.
Well, there have been numerous changes since the last time we talked. You know, Adam has come on and gone his separate ways. He did some good for the platform as well. And now, of course, Jordan has stepped in. He's one of their customer service reps. Hope to get him on from time to time to do some periodic updates, as well as person that works with him. Going to introduce him to the GD community as well in the coming episodes. But for those of you that don't know, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself. What your name is, how you got your ID, etc.
All right. I'm Dave Duplante. I'm 54 years old, so I've been here a while. I've actually been on What If, and I've got it up on another screen because I'm old enough I can't remember all this stuff myself. Hold on. It'll just be about 5 minutes. Does
that look right?
That's a What If shot. No, that can't possibly be right. That's like, it's not really 20 years, but it's close enough. Got involved on the site just looking for sim type stuff to play. I've started with Sim League Baseball and have played essentially all the sims that are there. Picked zlionsfan because it's been my online name for forever, since we already know how old I am. Back in the days of AOL, that's where people started. And so, signed up, picked Lions fan. Surprisingly, there was already a Lions fan on there. Started, all right, a Lions fan. There was one of those too. So there were at least 2 Lions fans back in the 90s. They made the playoffs then, so that's why it was. So I did this clever hack. So write this down because I know it's real important to come up with tricky names. I went to the end of the alphabet and started with Z, and there wasn't a Z Lions fan. So now there is.
Yeah, so it's not the German iteration of zlionsfan.
No, the funny thing is, I was playing, I don't remember, it was a board game online against somebody from one of the Eastern European countries where Z is like, it's an actual word and it means something different. And so he thought that it might have been, it's like, oh, like, here's a Z where it doesn't belong. Maybe it's like, do you speak this? And I was like, nah, I don't have any idea about that at all.
Not today.
And the best part is, I don't even really follow the NFL closely anymore. So I'm not even an active Z Lions fan. I'm Z used to be Lions fan, but you can't change your username because who's this guy? Why do you take over that team? That's not right.
Yeah, definitely something to think about, being able to change your IDs. Imagine the confusion and cluster gaggle that would be on the platform if you could just arbitrarily go in and change your name. You never know who you're playing against.
Well, no, you would, because you know what it'd be. Everybody would be Sim AI.
Yeah. Hey, good point. Why can't I come up with that name? Well, let's get Daryl on. He's in the green room or the back room or whatever you call it, and I'm sure Daryl. How you doing, Daryl?
All right, man. How's it going?
Good to have you on again. Have you 2 guys played each other quite a bit?
Oh yeah,
a few times. I mean, you can guess who.
Well, I think he's in every world, so he's got to play it sometime.
I used to be. I've cut back a little bit, but I've tried to find worlds where you can't beat me, and I ran out. So,
you don't have to look very far.
Well, Z or Dave is usually in the 1A world, and Daryl hangs around at the 1AA and the double or D2. So it'll be.
And I never was in D2 that often, but then I don't even remember what drew me back down there for something or other. I can't even remember. And then now I've got 2 teams in D2, but for me, it's kind of I still play the game, but it's a kind of a break from recruiting because it's just way easier to recruit in D2. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just get sick of 1AA. I'm like, screw this, damn 1A teams, and so go down to D2, and I ain't got to fight. So there's plenty for everybody.
Dave has a bunch of teams that are, in the Power 5 conferences. How's recruiting working out for you when you're dealing with SEC and Big 12 type coaches?
Well, it's actually gone a little better than I was expecting because my first foray into 1A, I didn't really know what I was doing. And it was back in different times. And you'd think, well, there's not as many people in 1A. And that does make a difference, especially when you get down to who's in your 180, who's within a reasonable distance of you. And it depends more on factors that I hadn't paid as much attention to because in 1AA, there's not as many people and you kind of know who the good recruiters are. But in 1A, you have to be more careful because there's nobody, it's not like there's a level above where you're picking whatever they're not going over. But at the same time, you have the extra money. And since there's not a playoff system, it's almost like, well, if I can get to a decent bowl and please draw a sim this time, that's not a bad season. I'll be here another year. So it's all right. It's not bad. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing it in Wyoming. I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't a state on my list. But, if you want to play, Texas, somewhere like that, California, sure. There's enough for at least 3 power teams. And they only beat me by about 50 points. So it's not too bad.
Now, for those that don't remember, your goal is to coach a team in each state. So you want to be able to coach in all 50 states. So have you decided what to do about Alaska?
Who? What? I don't remember that guy.
Yeah.
What I mean is that's what HD is for, because you get all 50 plus DC, and then in football you only have 49 in DC, and Wyoming was the last one. So I suffered through Hawaii. I suffered through Wyoming. I'm still in Wyoming because, it turns out not a lot of people want to be out in that area between California and the Midwest. And so as long as not too many people are recruiting, it's only moderately bad.
Yeah,
but man, if you
Colorado teams that
right,
come in there, and some of the Utah teams, but
there's one Colorado guy, and then the conference mate at Boise State, and so it's not, we're just holding on. But even then, it kind of depends. Are there elites who want to make a run? Because even with that distance advantage, there's only so much you can do, and we're okay at Wyoming, so it's not like I've got a strong record to roll on, but it's not bad. And again, this is in that background of 1A isn't nearly as full as it was. If it was the old days going at Wyoming, I don't know what you'd be doing, because there'd be somebody at Utah State who'd be putting in $150,000 on that fourth string defensive back. Neither of you are ever going to play. So
yeah, just because the emotional factor says he's mine and I'm taking him.
I got to get every guy. You're right.
You mentioned having coached at Hawaii in order to fulfill your circuit of 50, in this case 49 states for GD. I coached at Hawaii a time or two, and it was probably the most frustrating recruiting effort that I have encountered at any level, simply because the distance is a factor, of course. I mean, the limited number of recruits to begin with, and then when you factor in those that are of any quality, you're talking 2, 3, 4 maybe each year if you're very, very lucky. But the frustrating part for me was the fact that my first fence line, as you call it, was California. And you've got all those successful D1A programs in California just munching away at all of those California recruits. Mm-hmm. And then the next line would be your Arizona State, your Nevada, that area, Utah. So you almost had to go into the Colorado area in order to get any decent, I should say, to avoid any pressure on some of those recruits. But again, they weren't quality recruits. So when you did get a good one, and this is where the frustration came in, you'd get a good one that you have spent numerous campus visits, whatever it took to get him green. And now you've got a close proximity school, and in some cases, even a D1 AA school that could, just inundate this particular recruit with campus visits, what have you, and take him and turn him green in no time, and all your effort is gone. And it just seemed to me like that happened more and more from Hawaii than in any other area that I've ever recruited in, and I think I've recruited in every one. Was that similar to what you experienced there as well?
Yeah, it was the exact same thing. So even if you do the thing where you look at, for certain positions, like defensive back and like wide receiver, offensive line, wide receiver, there's some, but somewhere there's no undecided 1As. You drop down to 1 AA and try to pick some of the decent ones. It's still exactly what you're talking about. It's minimum 1,800 miles, maybe, for the ones that are right on the coast. And it takes one guy that's local, and then that's it. And like you're saying, you don't even find out about it on the first day. It would be to the point where I'd wait until like 2 days after signing, let everything settle down. And then obviously there, you can't really go after any sim-owned ones because they've already gone.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing there. The worst thing about it is, if you don't start off with Hawaii already in a good position, even the guys who are local, there was one year where I think the number 3 running back was in Honolulu. So, I mean, I'm going to get him, but he was, Sims were considering him first, and it must have taken me like 75, 85,000 to flip him because I'm a low program, and even though I'm local and nobody else is going to come, and I can't not get him, because if I don't get that guy, I'm going to have no running backs at all. So it's just, and there are guys who've had success. V. Howard, I think, is one guy who just dominated Hawaii. He knew how to do something that I just don't know how to do. But I just prefer the kind of the HD style where location is important, but not for everyone. And there are ways where you can recruit long distance and not get crushed. And I just never figured out how to do it Hawaii.
And that brings to mind the real life situation with Hawaii over the past year or so with COVID. I might look into it. I'm curious now to see what they did with that, because Hawaii has that vaccination ban. So, did they play any home games? I honestly don't know. Did they travel away constantly, or did they maybe come to the States for, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then go back home? I'm inquiring minds want to know. Daryl, have you ever coached at Hawaii?
No.
Okay, well, you can't come
don't
back
do
on
it.
the show.
I have absolutely no desire. I have fits where I'm at. I'm sure not putting myself through that.
You're not allowed back on here until you do. You got to
I'm not that ambitious.
It is by far one of the more brutal recruiting locations. And
I've recruited people in Hawaii. Does that count?
oh yeah, that's a good practice. And
Same difference. It's just kind of in reverse.
Exactly.
Because there's not going to be a guy there. Who would go to Hawaii? It's going to be a simp. You can take recruits from there.
I like to play him an exhibition so I can go to Hawaii. I mean,
yeah,
get your lay and check things out, and bring home some Pele souvenirs so you get bad luck and all that good stuff. Well, guys, we got some questions on the board that actually raised its head back up, so to speak. And I know we've talked about this on the show a couple of times, but wanted to bring it up. We've got a lot of new players, from what I can tell. Seeing a lot of new names pop up, and it tells me that either there was a free sign up or mega discount if you sign up or something, but seeing a lot of new names. So I wanted to talk about this again, since it did come back up. And that is how important is formation IQ at each of the levels. Specifically, what we're looking at here is the fact that it's been noted. I shouldn't say the fact, because that implies it's true. The mention that IQ levels carry a different importance as you climb the divisional ladder. And I'm a proponent of the belief that IQ matters less at D3 than it does at D1A. Let's go to you, Dave, and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction that I would go in. And I don't talk in detail with other coaches that much, just because we tend to, you run into a lot of guys that have been coaching for a long time. We just kind of have our own styles. But I feel like when you get up that far, when there's not nearly as much room for your players to improve, especially if you're recruiting 1A talent, you got to make the difference somewhere. And it just seems natural that would be formation. Now, again, people have ways of winning just about regardless. So you're going to see the guys who put practice time into every formation and then just use 2 of them. And there are reasons why you do it that way. But I feel like for me, when I have teams at multiple levels like now, I do put more time into formation practice in 1A than I would in 1AA. And then similarly in D2 and D3, I would do progressively more time into player stats, into player attributes, rather than into formations.
Yeah, I've found that generally speaking, your quality players, there's a nice basket of quality players where there's very little differentiation between their cores. And then you have a larger basket of some of your mid-tier type players. But for the most part, those top-notch players are spread out amongst the power conference teams and those teams with winning programs. And when you're at one of those, that's when, like you said, there's very little room to grow in comparison to some of the lower levels. So that's why I think you can really differentiate between your team and another team by doing something maybe they're not doing, which is spending that practice time on formation IQs. Is that kind of your line of thinking as well, Daryl?
I've been all across the board. I've been all across the board on that whole situation. I see the point of what you're saying is like say at Division I, the guys are pretty well high on their cores anyway. And so, there's a lot of people that you're not going to see as much growth just because they start out so high to start with. And so they want to stick more practice in formations. But at the same time, I've played games where I've played against people that don't practice formations, and they've been successful with that formation.
Right.
Jhunterz's game analyzer used to, it doesn't anymore, but it used to put down your, formation IQ or whatever in there. I'd be in the 60s or 70s for my formation, and they'd be in maybe 20 or 18. And, they'd connect on, I don't know how many deep bombs or whatever else, I'm like, what the heck, So, yeah, I mean, I've struggled and argued both ways. I've put a bunch in this and I put a bunch in that. I can honestly say I've not seen anything one way to another. I've basically got the way I said it, and I forget it, and I never go back to it because it's.
Well, yeah, Shannon and I, Holdaway, have talked about this. God, it's been a long time ago now. And one of the things that struck me was, especially at D3, it is so easy to grow your players. Yeah. Or if you've got a good team, to grab some of the definitive top of the notch, top of the line players. And that instantaneously separates you from some of the has-beens or some of the lower tiers. And when you play against a school like that, it's almost like they're the junior high team and you're the high school team because of the quality of your player. Yeah. So no matter how much or how efficiently they execute their formations and their play schemes, it still can't overcome the sheer strength and speed and athleticism of those players that are essentially high school players in that comparison. So at that point, the difference is huge, and formation IQ is pretty much worthless just because of the brute strength factor. Whereas D1A, you don't get those setups where you're playing a junior high team versus a high school team. You may be playing a junior squad versus a senior squad, or a sophomore squad versus a senior squad. That's relatively close in core. So that's when that IQ, and that is my belief. That's been my experience. Now, the other question, of course, that everybody asks after that is, well, how much time do you put into that practice? How much time do you vote to your core improvement versus your formation improvement? And again, that varies depending on your scheme, the quality of players you got. Is there something that you do consistently with that, Dave, to kind of set your team up the way you want it?
I kind of do the same thing across all the worlds that I'm in. It helps a lot just right now having almost all 1A teams. And what I tend to do is 2 offense, 2 defense, and then go pretty heavy on special teams because I'm going to be punting a lot. And, we want to make sure we get those punts off. And I got to make sure my punter can kick field goals. So, because I only recruit the one specialist. But and
we're going to talk about that next. Good segue.
Foreshadowing. And the downside of doing that is then I don't really get that experience of saying, okay, well, if I do it this way, if I put in 15 minutes in each formation versus 25 minutes, with enough of a difference where I could expect to see something, I'm not necessarily going to know where that's coming from. Not that you would, because then you have different players, you have different opponents or whatever, but just without, it's more of a, I feel like this is how I would want to do it. And that's kind of one of the boxes I put myself in, that I make assumptions of not even necessarily about the engine, but like, this is how I want to do it. And then if it's not a good way of doing things, whoops.
Well, Daryl, on the other hand, he doesn't spend any time on formation practice or individual practice. He takes those practice minutes and converts them into recruiting money because he's got a backdoor key, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I got to win it somehow or other. So, yeah, I don't even worry about practice. We just, chug beers on the sideline and then wait for Saturday.
We talk about practice.
I show up waving a white flag. What are you talking about? and as you
I was starting to wonder if something happened to you in Leahy when we was battling for that defensive back.
In Leahy, what team is
I'm at Valdosta State.
Do
you not know that was me?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I didn't even battle for him. I was on him early on, and then I was like, oh, I've got no shot at this guy. So I kind of backed off, and I was actually on COVID quarantine for a couple of days. So there were a couple of days when I actually didn't. My wife had COVID, but she's fine. She's good to go. But I felt kind of down, and I actually missed, I think, 2 days of recruiting and game planning. And in one of the games, I won one of the games that I was going to game plan for and didn't. And had I game planned the way I intended, I would have got my butt kicked. So there's, because I looked at that thinking, man, I have lost big time.
You need to give your assistant coach a raise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going all run, and or I'm sorry, I was going to go all pass, and didn't change it because I was down. So my all run offense stayed in, and my opponent apparently smelled my idea and decided to counter it. And when he did, he countered the wrong way, thankfully for me. So we barely squeaked it out in the second half. But back to the punter situation that you mentioned, Dave, that's something that I have done in the past. And playing for more position availability, basically, I know you're talking about one, but sometimes that makes a difference by just having a punter who does your kicking. There's a lot of different takes on this from a lot of different coaches, but what I've done in the past is tried only a kicker and only a punter, and kind of taken some note of how that worked out for me, and went back to just having a kicker and a punter. And here recently, I finally put the hammer down and said, from here on out, I'm doing nothing but a punter, no kicker, period. And my thinking is I punt way more than I do field goals. Extra points, punters seldom ever miss extra points.
Wait. You're saying that somebody misses an extra point?
Yeah, there's some extra points missed out there from time to time.
I don't know that I've ever seen one.
Yep, they are very, very, very rare. And it doesn't say necessarily if it was tipped or blocked. It just says, extra point is no good, or whatever the case may be. But so I've gone to strictly a punter. And, if he's got good technique and good strength, he helps me, maintain a good field position balance, which then translates to shorter field goals, theoretically. And, I scooch my field goal tries down a little bit until he's a senior. But I always start off with a freshman punter and just turn the keys over to him and let him run with it. And I've had success with it. You keep one punter. What is your rationale?
So it's the same thing. And this is one where I actually did some experimentation. And what I discovered is at this point in time when I did it, and I think we all feel like that there's not really been changes to the engine in several years because these devs are really wary about messing with it.
Sure.
At the time, so it could be the same today, kickers could not punt effectively. Punters could kick effectively. And so that, in addition to what you're talking about, we're going to punt more often. And to be honest, when you get up and you're playing elite teams, doesn't matter what level, you're rarely going to win with field goals. You might need a field goal, but your focus needs to be more on touchdowns. I have won an occasional game by getting that extra field goal, but I would rather have another contributor somewhere, particularly if you can pick up a quality recruit at like offensive line or, maybe quarterback, depending on how your offense is built, or on the defensive side, if it's one of those years where everybody's running a 3-4 and there's not many linebackers around, but you found an extra one, that kind of thing. What I don't recommend is having neither of them, because that's terrible. So don't do it. And we may have covered that in the past. I have had times where some guy running my recruiting decided we don't need a punter this year. We already have one. And then this actually happened. We got to like week 11 and I got my butt stomped, and the guy left a note and he said, hey, you should probably have a punter because, and I looked and there's no punter on my roster. And obviously I was a sim heavy schedule, but to get that far in the season and literally not realize, like, that's a bit too much autopilot, of course. But like, don't do that, because the non-specialists do not do either of them well. The punting, just having one punter, that the thing about that is, especially in 1A, you got to be careful with your scholarships, because if you leave an open spot, the sim will often be like, oh, you need a kicker. And I have that on one of my teams now. It's like, okay, then you've got a kicker for 4 years unless you want to.
You can't redshirt him if he's the only one filling that position.
So then, I'm like, okay. And sometimes he's not bad because I kind of feel like the baseline for kickers is adequate. So as long as you're not trying to have him kick, 55-yard field goals or whatever. But
really,
it's also fair, I think, to say that if you look at where that extra scholarship is going, well, who are you getting? Are you getting like an 11th offensive lineman? Are you getting a 6th running back? There for a lot of us, and probably in fairness for my offense and my defense, maybe it doesn't make that much difference. It just feels like I don't feel like I got a lot from having a kicker. And the thing is, in 1A, there's not a lot of good kickers around. It's another one of those recruiting weird things. And if I only have to get one specialist every 4 years, then that gets me out of that. Do I need to battle for this guy? I don't even want to battle for him. But there's 6 guys in 1A this year. And if I don't get him, I get Mr. Green Jeans kicking or something.
Exactly.
So I just hate being in that position.
Now, do you look at punters the year before yours graduates to kind of see if there's somebody there that you would even consider signing and redshirting?
I do not. I do not like redshirting anyone. And really, I like to keep my red shirts on offense. I like to do quarterback, running back, offensive line. In the years where I take a quarterback, I got to a point now where I realized, even with my offense, maybe 2 quarterbacks see the field. Why do I have 5 of them? There is a point where it helps to have incremental improvement. So, you're going from a 5th-year senior to a 4th-year junior, but I'm not there. And I can use that spot somewhere else. But again, I could see, I've played against guys who have 5 quarterbacks, and then that might be a reason for them to be like, I'd rather be able to have a quarterback every time in that cycle. But then it does mean, if I see the number 1 punter and I'm in Hawaii and he's in Honolulu, it's like, I don't want to have 2 punters, so I'm not going to sign that guy. And I probably should have signed that guy.
Daryl, do you keep one or the other or both?
I've tried both, but most of the time, I do a kicker and a punter. But I've went to just the single, and so it like I said, it's personal preference. I can see now, like I said, it does kind of open up another position. And will I battle for one? No. I don't battle for a punter or a kicker or anything like that. I'll take a piece of crap when I don't care. Like I said, it's when it comes down to it, I'm after touchdowns, and if I have to settle for a field goal, I hope I get it. But I don't do any battling or anything like that. I'll go after whatever's. I look for an undecided, or if I've got the money, can knock some sims off real quick, I'll do that. But for the most part, you offer him the world, because he's going to start and he's and all that. You offer him the world, and if he signs, great. And if he doesn't, we'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. With that mindset, if he's the only one on your team that's going to be kicking the ball or a punter. Then you offer him a freshman start, 75% playing time. And, when he signs on your squad, you look at it sometimes and you can actually, and I've done this and scratched my head because I tried to figure out the math, but you look at playing time and my punter's playing 600% of the time. And I was like, how in the hell do you play 600% of a game? Well, this clown is kicking extra points. He's kicking field goals. He's punting. So, if
he's long snapping to himself.
Well, and what I found out was if there are only 2 let's say, for example, 2 punting opportunities in the game, and he plays in both of those opportunities, he has 100% playing time. Mm-hmm. So in that same game, if you're running the score up and he kicks 10 times, there's where you get that 600% playing time because he's met his 100% with the 2 punts. But now, in addition to that, he's played in 10 other plays that he's not even supposed to be in. And each one of those credits above the 100%. Huh. And so his work ethic goes through the roof. You get a punter with a work ethic of 15, by the time he's a senior, if you do that, his work ethic's at 100. So, you get a punter that's at 30 or 40. By the time he's a junior, he's in the 90s in work ethic. And, heaven forbid you get a punter that's very high. This guy's kicking, 200-yard field goals, for crying out loud. He's phenomenal.
No, this is why I never knew that, because you have to have 10 touchdowns and 2 punts in a game for that to work. So what I usually get is the thing where he's got like 102% playing time. He's like, really? I signed for this? I mean, I guess this is okay.
My buddy on Majique's team's getting 600% playing time.
Yeah, that's the letter in my inbox. Why am I not getting 600? Why did you not? You should have signed a kicker, because then I would have gotten 150% playing time, because we would actually got down the field a bit. But I guess you didn't even do that.
Yeah, there's
now to battle Majique for punters.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Now here's the dilemma that I'm not man enough to try to figure out or set it up to make it happen. But my question is, if it's 4th down and you go for it, does that count against him having an opportunity? Because he probably thinks this 4th down, I'm supposed to be punting, and you went for it and ran the ball, and I didn't get a chance to. So if that's the truth, and that's the fact of the layout, that means that a punter, if there's only one punter on your team, will never have less than 100% playing time. And we all know what happens when you give a recruit 100% playing time.
Yeah.
His work ethic goes through the roof. So for all those that are watching the show and have one punter or one kicker, whatever the case may be, then look at your percentage of playing time. Go into his game log and see just how high that percentage is, especially if you've got a kicker and your offense sucks, because that kicker is going to be punting a bunch. It could. Why wouldn't it be over 1,000% playing time if he's punting a whole bunch?
Mine do not go under 100%. So, and we're pretty aggressive on 4th down. So I was looking in particular at my Louisville team in Bryant, and my punter is right there at 100%. None of my teams have someone under 100. So I think it is. Yeah. So you're never going to have a punter under 100%, which means you should always be off. If you have a single punter, you should always offer him 75%, because you're going to get it. I never thought about the 200% thing, and I've been running a single punter for calendar years. So that's good.
Look at it sometime and see, especially not necessarily the first game or two, but I've noticed it. I usually check the game log about the 4th or 5th game, just kind of keep in touch with how the guys are performing, or look at the roster setup, and you can see where their playing time is. And it's always through the roof on the punters. So, but anyway, enough of that. Hope, somebody learned something today. If they look at the show, maybe, who knows?
I did right here.
The other thing I always tell people too, especially newcomers, is, sometimes if it's late in the recruiting cycle, and you, especially at the lower levels, it's late in the recruiting cycle, and you desperately need a punter or a kicker, and there's nothing left but trash. Look at quarterbacks with technique and strength, because you can sign that quarterback and convert him to a punter or a kicker, and his cores are probably the best in that position change than any other position change that's available out there. And again, here's a guy who's a quarterback who may have Sims on him or may have another coach on him, but you see that he's going to be a great punter or kicker based on what's available. This guy's going to be your man. You can offer this quarterback freshman start 100% playing time, because once you convert him to that punter or kicker, he's going to get it. And the guy that's recruiting him may be recruiting him as a quarterback for next year, and he's not offering him a freshman start or playing time.
Not since they fixed that bug.
Yeah. So now, now you've got an opportunity where you can essentially just steal a quarterback and not even use him for that position. So that's one of the old man or veteran knowledge points that I like to share with some of the newcomers. So give that a try sometime and see how it works for you. And let me know. I enjoy getting feedback from these shows. I've gotten the ones that say, you are so clueless, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then I've gotten the ones that say, holy crap, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that. So, hopefully it's beneficial. So at this point, what is it that, and I know Daryl's been on the show numerous times and he's seen it quite a bit. Not sure how much you've watched, Dave, but what would you like to see us do on this show that we haven't done so far?
You mean there's anything left? I thought you'd covered all of it, basically.
Well, I sit down with my show script sometime and looking at things to discuss and, scour the forums to see if there's any hot conversations. But here we are going into, closing out our second year here in a couple months. And we've dropped down from weekly shows to, 2 shows a month. And there's still, plenty to talk about. It's just I can't think of anything.
Well, I think the thing I'd want to hear about, but, of course, we just be kind of chatting is, the new sim. Like, hey, the new Gridiron Dynasty, what's it going to be like? When's it coming? When are the betas available? What should be in it? What do you not want to see in it? Get one of the what if guys on here and watch him kind of squirm because he can't tell us anything because they're not far enough along to really commit to anything. And we're like, okay, so when you're recruiting an offensive lineman, are you going to be doing this? They're like, we don't even have positions set up yet, man. It's not there.
Yeah, I know that Adam and Jordan even recently and Chris, they've all addressed it in some degree here on the show. But Adam and I there were times we're on the phone 2 hours just talking different scenarios or different layouts. And one of the ones that we discussed quite in depth was a coaching pipeline where you could actually put more recruits on your team from a state that you heavily recruited or had high success rate. For instance, if you're at Arkansas and you've got just tons of success from Missouri, you're pulling recruits out of Missouri a lot easier than even Missouri is. It's similar to the elite status advantage, but it's more flexible and it varies based on the recruits you have on your team, because theoretically Texas has a Texas pipeline. All you got to do is be in Texas and you're pulling recruits for no money out of Texas. If you're in Wyoming, as you well know, it can be pretty sparse. And if you establish a pipeline in Kentucky,
Hawaii,
Hawaii, over a period of years, boom, you're just funneling them, And Mike Myers at St. Olaf, he and I talked a long time ago, and he even mentioned on the show, there are some states that he has great success from. So,
there's states he doesn't have success from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So there's some of
that
that already, there. It's just by happenstance. It's not programmed. But we talked about that to some great extent, and Adam was looking into some of that. Programming wise, who knows how much of a nightmare that would be. And, I even tossed it out there. I said, well, we could send in a copy of our high school diploma from where we graduated. And now the recruits that are in that state would know that I'm a homeboy and would want to come to me because that's real life. We could incorporate that. There's so much fraud. I'd have diplomas from 50 states.
DA did that with their NCA, didn't they? The pipeline stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm
looking forward to that coming back too.
Yeah, I think the pipeline thing in general is nice because it kind of counters some of the stuff we've been talking about. If you had another way where distance is still important, but if you establish this thing, then maybe distance to somewhere, if you're in Hawaii, through whatever means, you have a pipeline to Nevada where you can kind of recruit on more of an equal basis, then one thing it might do is kind of get away from, how in the current sim, people who've been around long enough know that when you're in D3, you want to go to one of these, and D2, you want to go to one of those, that kind of thing. And even if you're in 1A and you think about real life, where do I want to coach? Where do I not want to coach? If you give people in other places a different way to approach things, then it kind of opens things up a little bit. And it's not as much about the meta where it's like, okay, this guy's at UCLA, this guy's at USC, they're going to recruit like that. So everything in Southern California is out. You could almost pick where the recruits are going to be just by looking at who is where. And when you have more variables in place, then it can make things a little more interesting. Not everybody looking for that, but it could shake things up.
When you look at the recruits considering page, and again, this was part of our discussion that I had with Adam, is on that considering page where it shows who that recruit is considering. Along with that school, it would identify the states that school has a pipeline in. And so, for instance, if you're at Valdosta and you've got Florida in your backyard and nobody gets past you to go into Florida without paying more than you're going to pay, all of a sudden now you see the school at St. Joseph's, but he's got a pipeline to Florida. Now you know that his recruiting effort is going to be on equal terms with yours from a financial aspect. His scouting visits are going to be the same as your 360, or his home visits or his campus visits are going to cost the same as your 360. So that even though this guy is in St. Joe, he's battling you for a recruit in Miami. It's not like you have that great big huge distance advantage anymore because he's got that pipeline set up, and he can only have one or two schools or states set up as a pipeline. That would, like you said, get away from some of the hard-coded, defined hotspots. As I mentioned, Valdosta, you've got Florida in your backyard, or Humboldt in D2. You've got, pretty much the West Coast sewed up. So that would change some of those variables, changing the recruiting dynamic in each world, because not everybody in each world will have the same pipeline set up. So, but anyway, that was one of those. And that short little discussion took about 2 hours because we really got into the nuts and bolts of it.
What if the pipeline wasn't a state, but it was like a high school?
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing where we're like, this is great. The developers are like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, we even went to, if it was a school, you would have a super advantage, and then you would broaden out to 100 miles of that school. You would have still an advantage, but it would be decreased to 360 away from that school. But the math involved in that, just from a recruiting aspect, you would have to do the math to figure out, where is this guy within that 360? Okay, so now, even though he's 1,900 miles away from me, he's within 360 of my hotspot, my pipeline focus. So his recruiting visit is going to be $236 versus, it would show that on the recruit screen. So the programming math would be insane to do all of that. But anyway, I
wouldn't like it.
Yeah, we went through a couple beers on that discussion. Definitely. Well, Daryl, what do you think about the world in general today?
Oh, you got the hard one.
Yeah, well, I know I caught up on a couple of the old episodes that I had missed the last couple of weeks. And the one I seen where you threw me under the bus with Jordan, saying that I was the one that getting hold of him about the
about what?
picking on the people coming back. So,
oh yeah, that's
getting the elites. Yeah, coming back for elites.
I told him if he wanted to have a good discussion on that, to get a hold of you, because you and I have thrown that one around quite a bit, and we're in the same bus on that one. I don't think I watched
the one with Black Haze in it. And then what was weird was I sit there and I watched that one with Black Haze, and then next thing I know, our Adobe experiment with me and Jay and Grunt Boy and all them, we kind of moved along, and so now we dropped back down to 1AA, and ended up in the same conference as that Black Haze. So I got to talking to him a little bit, and so actually I've been kind of chatting back and forth with him because I noticed when he was on here, he said that he had some issues with recruiting at 1AA and all that. So I just kind of reached out to him and kind of asked him what he was doing and how he was doing it, and kind of gave him a different perspective. So hopefully that's helped him a little bit. But
I think if I remember correctly, his biggest issue, I think, was putting too much money on recruits early on.
Well, yeah, and he's the recruits. I kind of looked him up, and the recruits that he went after were very good recruits. But he's putting all his money in like 4 guys and then taking on 7 Sims. So I mean, is 4 studs worth taking on 7 Sims? And we all say no. So that's what I kind of tried to explain to him. The way I look at things and how what I go after, and so his last recruiting that I kind of helped him with, I think he signed all but 2, and he was battling for those with Sims, and the Sims end up taking him, of course, because he couldn't get him knocked all the way off. But
yeah, I'm a firm believer in depth will get you deep into the playoffs, and sometimes depth, good quality depth. I'm not talking just numbers. I'm talking guys that you could, confidently rotate in and out of your lineup at 95% all day long and not see a drop off. That kind of depth can overcome single position or single player talent any day of the week, because eventually that stud running back's going to get tired. And even though his cores are through the roof, tired cores suck.
Yeah. Because like I said, if you're involved in every play, and if, like I said, you got a stud running back, you're going to be throwing to him. You're going to be, running him. I mean, he's going to be doing one of them, all the time. And so, yeah, he's
exactly,
and every time he touches the ball, his stamina is going, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And, like Dave was saying about having 5 quarterbacks, I try to keep 4. Sometimes I find myself with 5, but one of the problems you run into having depth at single position, like the quarterback, or like, say, lineman, if you're running a nickel or a diamond, or I think where you only have 2 defensive or 2 linebackers, a nickel where you've only got 2 linebackers. If you've got a bunch of depth at linebacker, if you're running, 8 linebackers and you're running a nickel, you're pissing a lot of guys off because they're not getting playing time. And so what I like to do, especially at those short positions, quarterbacks, I'll use it as an example, is I'll have my best throwing guy be the one throws the ball. And then, the next guy, or maybe even a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, whatever, he's in on running plays. And then I've got my offensive depth chart set up to where when I'm ahead by so many points or losing by so many points and the game's already over, I've got my scrub defensive lineman or line set up and depth chart and offensive scrub depth chart to where when that happens in the game, those underclassmen come in and get some playing time. Yep. And that kind of keeps everybody happy, especially at those short positions like your quarterbacks. When you got 4 guys on the bench watching one guy play, they're not going to be very happy. And I saw coaches' depth chart as far as his game logs and stuff, and looked at his player percentages by looking at the individual player cards. And I noticed that every one of them had a work ethic that was improving. And I started looking through some of his games, and I said, oh, when he runs the ball, this guy's in. Oh, when he's kicking this guy's butt by 20 points with 5 minutes to go, this guy's in. So I learned something by looking at somebody else's games and picked it up and shared that with you here today. Can't say we keep secret.
And that's back whenever I was in my heydays in Rockney with Bucknell. I only always had 2 quarterbacks. I never had more than 2. One, like I said, one would throw the ball and the other one was playing on passing downs. And so I just, because I'd see all these coaches with 4 or 5 quarterbacks on there, I'm like going, man, they're wasting a bunch of spots. Like, I got 2 quarterbacks and I've got, I'll have, 5 running backs and 5 wide receivers and, have 10 offensive linemen. And I'd run 5 offensive linemen for passes and I'd run 5 offensive linemen for runs. Or I've seen people that'll run 5 offensive linemen on first down and then run 5 different linemen on second down. Yes. And now third down, they put their best 5 linemen in.
Yep. And that's, with the quarterback situation, since we're talking about that, when I use 4 quarterbacks, or on that rare occasion, the 5th one, is when I've got a passing team. or a passing setup, because I want those cores to grow and fester all those years so that when he's a senior, he's capable of getting the job done. If I've got a running offense that's predicated on, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, I don't give a shit what my quarterback looks like because he's not throwing the ball.
Yep.
I could care if it's, blind Mary with shackled ankles. I don't care. You're just handing the ball off. Have a nice day, So those are some
you
of the
take
things
two of those guys and you make them running backs, not literally converting them, but right. Instead of having 4 and 5, maybe you have 2 and 7 because you're running all the time. Why do you have, if you're throwing 100 passes a year, you don't need 4 quarterbacks.
Exactly.
But like what you were talking about, if you get more running backs in there who are in there at 100% and you're running all the time, what's going to happen late third quarter, late fourth quarter when you have yet another fresh guy to go in there? Why would you not use that scholarship at this key position?
Exactly.
People just
somewhere else.
That's what got me to change some of where I was picking up guys, because I'd look at my depth chart and I'd be like, here's this guy. I have like a 6th wide receiver. He got in no plays this year. Now, some of that's because I'm obviously not rotating him. But the idea is, look, if I throw the ball a bunch and this guy has never seen the field, why do I have 6? I need to use that someplace else or rotate what I'm doing, because you don't get any better with a guy who does literally nothing the entire year.
Yeah, and I've seen shotgun teams with 5 running backs. It's like, really? Or wishbone teams with, 15 wide receivers. That's, what are you doing? But anyway, hopefully some new folks that are tuning into the show, maybe even for the first time, will recognize there's some golden nuggets to be had in some of these shows, more times than not, even if it's just a off the cuff comment or something. And, all these coaches that come on the show, they're on the show because they're active members in the community, the Gridiron Dynasty community. So I welcome anybody and everybody to come on the show anytime. You don't have to be a special invited guest or be selected for an interview. Pop on. The link is going to be in that first post on the pinned TTATO thread there in the Gridiron Dynasty forum. Come join us sometimes. We love to get variety on here, and never too many, as I say. The more the merrier.
Maybe a guy with some hair.
Yeah.
But why would you do that? I mean, obviously,
Surely there's one out there somewhere.
I hear you. Well, Dave and Daryl, thank you guys so much for being on tonight. I really appreciate it. And next show will be in 2 weeks, so that'll be right before Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a happy Halloween and got some goodies, and you weren't scared to death by any of the trick-or-treaters.
Thanks
any
for having
party
me.
words, Daryl?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. How about you, Dave?
Glad we could be a couple turkeys a few weeks early for you.
Go Hokies, right? Gobble, gobble. Guys, again, I mean, I really do. I know I say it every show, but the truth is I appreciate you guys popping on and spending time with us and educating those that care to tune in and learn something from time to time. So once again, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. And to our viewers, come join us again in 2 weeks. I'm Majique, the host of TTATO. We'll see you then.